Hi, my name is Samantha Roberts. I'm a research scientist with the Center for Innovative Design and Analysis. And today I'm going to talk about how to create an analyzable database within REDCap. Early last week, last Monday, our lovely, amazing REDCap team did a presentation about the life cycle of a project within REDCap. They went over a lot of the basics on how to enter data, but what I'm going to be talking about today is how to create a database that a statistician would like to receive to get the data on the back end, and also how to also make it easier for coordinators to enter data on the front end. They're just a kind of generalizable rules that you would want to follow. And this is specific to REDCap because that's what here in Colorado that we use. But this is also translatable to any database that you create to enter data or any survey that you are going to be able to create. These rules will also translate to those other types of databases. This is the rules that I've been using for the 15-ish years I've been creating databases in multiple different types like softwares and different softwares and programs to create databases in. So I'm going to start with just a little presentation, and then I'm just going to dive into REDCap and show you different aspects of REDCap and things that you want to think about when you are creating a database. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see the correct view.
Perfect. Okay. Over here. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I will be monitoring as well as Lauren. So just you can put it in the chat or you can raise your hand and I will stop and answer any questions. So first, we're going to talk about best practices for database development, some data and variable format and naming consistency, what I would recommend doing. And then in REDCap, we're going to design a database around your data collection needs. So I'm sure that you have looked at a lot of the other sessions, not all of them, but some of them we have talked about a birth weight data data set. And so we're going to look at the data that we want to collect and then how we would then create that within REDCap. So, yeah. So some best practices, these are all things to keep in mind when you're creating a database. And I bring these up as I have run into every single one of these issues in in most databases that I have come across where I did it when we didn't create it. So minimize redundancy. So what this means is that don't ask the same questions in different forms or in different surveys that really you only need to be that only need to be answered once. So for example, race, ethnicity, you don't want to ask that in like a baseline questionnaire and then ask that again in like an end of study questionnaire or on a week 2 questionnaire if you're asking questions over, a long period of time. That has happened before, and the issue that you can run into is that you can have the same person answer differently for each one of those. And so then you come down to how are you going to combine those, which one is going to be correct or both correct. There's all of these questions that you'll come up with. The same with like age. Somebody can put their age in differently, and that could be an issue kind of depending on maybe when their birthday was or, what you're asking. Ethnicity is another one. There's some kind of like, baseline information that you don't want to ask a second time simply because somebody can answer it differently. And then you're kind of left with this discrepancy and you're unsure what to do on the back end. And that's just something that we have to bring up and talk about. If there is a question that you need to ask multiple times, don't create a separate form. Don't just create a form and then have that form be asked at every single time point. So that's creating a longitudinal database, which we'll talk about and I'll show you, instead of creating one big form and then saying here's for week 1 and here's the questions for week 2, again with a lot of redundancy and having to copy and paste and do these questions multiple times. Another thing that is a best practice is to test the database from all the perspectives of people that are going to be using it. So what I mean by that is not just the front-facing coordinator, right? You need to go through that as a coordinator, have somebody else who didn't create the database come in and look at it as a coordinator. And then also have somebody who is an analyst view it from the back end. Like, what do the formats look like? What do the names look like? Does the skip logic make sense? How are you dealing with missing data? Hey, there's a better way that you could ask this question. Like, getting more feedback from other people would make a more analyzable and just like a better database to make sure you're asking good questions and getting the answers that you want. Forms should be organized based on like when the data is collected. That's just easy for you as a coordinator as well as an analyst on the back end, instead of having like your first form be baseline data and then your second form be like end of study data, and then your third form be data that you're collecting at week 1, 2, 3, and 4. It becomes harder to view when you're looking at it within REDCap or anything else. You would want to put like, what are all the questionnaires and forms that you're asking for baseline? What are all the ones that you're asking either at multiple time points or at this specific time point? You want it to be ordered in the time that you want the questions answered. A big one that is huge for analysts is avoid free text fields as absolutely as often as you can. That is a really hard space for a really hard type of variable that analysts record on the back end. The way that I recommend to people is that whatever question that you're asking, that you're like, oh, this needs to be a free field, unless it's like a qualitative kind of question. A lot of these, when you're writing your manuscript, you're going to want these to be in specific like categories. So whatever specific categories that you would be putting in different answers into anyways, that's where you should start, right? You should then have this be have all the categories that you're interested in comparing or looking at or want on the back end. And then you could always have an other field where there is a free text field. So therefore, if something, if an answer or an outcome or something doesn't fit within this categories that you created, there is a space for other. It just makes it easier, again, on the back end when we're, analyzing, instead of trying to like pull out all of these keywords to then group a group of individuals into a certain category. You can do that on the front end. Do not mix data types in an entry field. So meaning I don't put in the unit and the number in the same field. Either tell somebody what unit that they need to put. So this is very relevant when you're talking about lab data. Either decide beforehand that you want your lab data to be in milligrams per deciliters or in kilograms or in pounds or inches or feet or whatever unit. Either specifically state that or give two separate questions. Like, here's the value and then here's the units. Because again, that just makes it easier on the back end to be able to, because usually you want everything to be in one unit, but maybe you're collecting weight from two different, from Europe and the United States, right? They do theirs in, I think, their weight in kilograms, and we do ours in pounds. So that way on the back end, an analyst can use the unit to group and then convert to make sure either everything is in pounds or everything is in kilograms. IDs, this is a big one. Please, as a statistician and for your own sanity, don't make IDs super long. Make them make sense, right? If you have multiple sites, maybe give each site a different number. If you think that you're going to have over 1,000 patients, make sure that you have enough numbers to represent that patient. So I would do, 01 underscore 00001 if I think I'm going to have over 1,000 patients. Therefore, I can have enough space to have 1,001 patients if I need to as a patient ID number. A big rule to look at, to think about, especially in REDCap, is that there is an auto numbering availability in REDCap, and so you can keep that. But you would probably also want to have your own study ID in a very as a variable, kind of in one of your very first forms, especially if a lot of people do their screening as well as their enrollment in the same REDCap, right? So just because a REDCap ID number 1 doesn't mean it's an actual study ID. You could have, 1,000 REDCap IDs, but really only have, 500 people that actually were screened and then were eligible for the study. So you can use the REDCap automatic, but I would also recommend having your own ID. Just please make it less than 15 characters, especially if you are going to be exporting as an Excel. Excel tends to do weird things the longer the number is. Excel will tell me how I know they do this. It will round the last like couple numbers of your big over 15 character number, which then for an ID, that's a problem because then you'll have a bunch of the same ID because Excel just randomly decided to round it. Have a plan for missing data. Again, this is important on the front end for a coordinator, and then on the back end for an analyst. So you could do this by, if the form is complete, you labeled it as complete, but the variable is empty, that means missing. Or you want to indicate this is just missing, you can make up a number for it or make up a kind of anything to indicate that this is missing. So for example, if like age is missing, you could do like -999. That would indicate that this is a missing information, and not missing in the sense that hasn't been entered, but missing in the sense that it does not exist, right? That's a lot of the issue with leaving something blank as missing. On the back end, analysts, we look for that missing data. And so if it's blank, our question is it blank because it hasn't been put in or it was forgotten to be put in? Or is it blank because it's actually missing because this data couldn't be collected? So that's something, again, I would recommend, talking with an analyst, whoever is going to be analyzing your database, to kind of answer these questions. Again, I also recommend, if you're going to have an analyst who's going to be the one doing your data analytics at the end, to be a part of the process of creating your REDCap or any database. So variable format and naming, again, you want this to be consistent throughout the entire project, no matter how many forms and how many variables you have. One thing for variable names, include a hint of what you're asking or what the question is asking. Because again, on the back end, saying like var1, var2, var3, var305, that makes it really hard for us. If you have over 300 variables and you're like, I'm really interested in race and the weight and, this specific lab value or this specific, imaging or CT or whatever outcome number, if we don't have we're not going to be able to remember off the top of our head that var2 represents race and var1 is ID and var3 is age, versus we know that like the race variable is the race variable and the ethnicity variable is the ethnicity variable, right? So you would want to, and obviously you can't do that. You have to condense, if it's like a really long question, you want to create a variable name that sort of indicates what that's about. Just, it makes it easier even for you to kind of know what that variable means. Again, we can always go back to the code book, so technically it's fine, but just within doing analysis, having an indication of what that variable means is really, really helpful. Um, Numbering within variables. So you're going to have a lot, especially within REDCap. How it works is that there's usually a number and then some kind of value that number means. So, like, you could say if you want like a yes or no question, you have to give it a value of like 0, 1, 2, whatever. Um, what I recommend is decide beforehand, right? That no's are all going to be zeros and yeses are all going to be ones and maybes are all going to be twos, right? I don't knows are going to be 99s or 998 or whatever, unknown or don't know or refuse to answer. Those should all have like be the same number because if you switch it up, that just makes it on the back end for an analyst more easily to make a mistake, right? If you're thinking your first one, oh, this is a yes or no question, and the first time you received this as an analyst, 0 was no, 1 was yes, you might then go on and assume that every single yes no variable is going to be labeled the same because that would what would make sense. If you change it in the middle as the database, yes, we can check, yes, we should check, and yes, we do check, but again, consistency is key so mistakes don't get made. The same with like control and intervention. If you were going to have like a scale, right, very satisfied to very unsatisfied, right, you want to make sure your positives and negatives are in the same direction, right? So if you want like 1 is very unsatisfied and then 5 is very satisfied, you want to like keep that consistency. So like 1 is very poor versus 5 is very excellent, right? You want that kind of consistency throughout all of those variables. And then a big one is with date and times. This can be the bane of existence or the bane of our existence when we're dealing with dates on the back end. They tend to just be very finicky, very frustrating on the back end for analyzed. So the way to make this easy for analysts is to keep the same date and time format throughout. So if the first time you put in a date, you're putting it in as being month, day, year, all of the rest of the dates should also be month, day, year. If you're going to be collecting date and time, you need to make the decision, are you going to make date and time one variable or date and time two separate variables? Now, analysts, we can deal with it either way. The issue comes in when we keep having to switch depending on what daytime variable we're looking for. So either decide to have date and time in the same variable or date and time in two separate variables, and then make sure that they're the same format every single time. And I'm going to give you examples of all of this. So next, this is kind of an idea of the data that we are going to be collecting and that we want to create the database for. So looking at this, we can see we have an ID. So this is participant. We want infant weight at birth in kilograms. We're specifically labeling that here. Race of infant, sex of infant, and then marital status of the mother, mother's age at enrollment, smoking status of mother, does the mother take prenatal vitamins, the race of the mother, mother's height, and then weight prior to pregnancy. And then we can see here we're going to be collecting some lab information, and we want it at 2 time points. We want baseline and 26 weeks. We want blood pressure and glucose. And then we want these 2 standardized kind of quality of life questionnaires that get asked, a lot. So there's the PHQ-9 and then the GAD-7. So I think this is physical health. This is a quality of life, and this is the generalized anxiety scale. I forget what D stands for. And these are very, very common questionnaires that get used a lot. I can almost guarantee you've answered both of these at some point in your life. They're very popular within the medical field, within research. If you're an epidemiologist, I'm sure you've heard of those, that you've used them before. The cool thing about REDCap is that they actually have these as an easily insertable survey so you don't have to put it in yourself. So we're going to come here. This is REDCap. How many people have used REDCap before? So part of this, so you could just do a raise your hand or no. I'm going to ask some questions throughout this part. This is going to be a little bit of a interactive part of this because I'm going to ask you guys some specific questions. So here's just a kind of generalized overview of REDCap. You have your Mind projects right here. You can add a new project here. REDCap has amazing training videos. So if you have any questions about anything, there's always a training video available to you to do. If you're somebody like me who works with a lot of REDCap projects, you will want to organize it based on your project, which and then I always recommend doing. I'm a little behind. I have some unorganized projects that I need to organize. But right here, we're going to talk about our REDCap seminar one. So I'm going to click this. So this is in the development stage. So if you watch the project, the REDCap life cycle of a project, this is sort of the first part is the development stage. This is where you're going to create all the different aspects of your project, as well as creating all the forms and surveys that you're going to be asking. So I think these are all have gone over, but one of the things I want to bring your attention to is that we can enable different modules and customizations within REDCap. So we can do randomization, email, SMS services, repeating instruments, auto numbering, sorry, as well as a scheduling module, which is for longitudinal data only. So repeating instruments, this is going to be really helpful if who has heard of an adverse event? So an adverse event is a non-expected negative outcome during a study. And it could be, severe versus they stubbed their toe, depending on the kind of, and this usually is collected for a randomized control trial. So when you are having a patient get a control drug versus a different kind of intervention drug, or they're trying a new drug or a different device or whatever, one of the main things, a big thing that you have to collect in the study is adverse events. And there are multiple questions that need to be answered based on that adverse event. So the severity of it, was this unexpected? When it happened, did they need to go to the hospital? Were they hospitalized? The ED? There's a bunch of questions that you need to ask. One that needs to be reported to the IRB, but then also needs to report usually to DSMB. Now, you can do what I did with one of the first times I had to collect this information is I created a form that had the same questions repeated like 50 times because we weren't sure. We were collecting every single thing that happened to these children in the 2 weeks that they were in the study. So if they got a cold, if they stubbed their toe, like literally anything that happened, we collected every single one of those. What you could have just done is done a repeating instrument. So you just have the first form, and then you can repeat it as many times as you need. So for every single adverse event, you can just add on that instrument again. That's a little bit different than the scheduling where you're going to have this form being asked at multiple different time points. So I kind of want to show you what that looks like. And that's going to be here. So define your events and designate instruments for them. So here you can see define my events. We have talked about what we wanted. We have some baseline information. We're collecting some information at baseline in 22 weeks, 26 weeks, and then we have end of study because we're getting infant information. So I've created 3 different time points based on the information that I need to collect. So this is going to be a longitudinal study. We are going to be following these mothers from when we find out they're pregnant through their birth of their child. So But we're really just cared about coming in at this 26 weeks and then the end of the study. I did this arbitrarily. This is like the days between baseline and this event, 26 weeks, and then 26 weeks and end of study. A lot of the time, you'll know the exact amount, like how many plus or minus how many days from the other one. Or sorry, this is the offset. So this is how many days, and then this is like how many days between that 26 weeks. So we're saying here I said plus 182 plus 7 or 182 minus 7, and same with 210 plus 21 and then minus 21 is the range that this information can be collected. The other thing is you can designate instruments for your event. And so this is how you would then go to, if we wanted to add or take away any forms. That's how we would do it. And this is actually one of my favorites when I'm a coordinator. I love this because I can very clearly see to make sure that I have all of the information that I need at the time points that I need it, based on these are the forms that we have created. So going back to designer or project setup here, we can go to, this is just, you can enable or disable this. We're doing longitudinal collection. This is surveys, like, are we going to be sending out surveys? But you would want to come to this online designer, which then enables you to create, import, or upload different things to create these different instruments. So you can see here's the instrument name. This is how many fields. You can pull out the PDF. This can also be very helpful when we're trying to submit for an IRB. You can do actions. So if you want to change the name of it, you want to copy it, delete it, or download it as a zip file. So all of this is really helpful. This one, we are using this as a survey, meaning that we can send this out to somebody via email, where they can then receive it, complete it, and then online. So it's not something you have to complete as the coordinator. So now coming in, so here we're doing demographics of the mother. So you can see here, from the beginning, you already saw that I did automatic numbering, but you can see I'm also including our record ID. So I've included that. So here I'm doing an example of what to do and what not to do. So you can see here, I love that we have years here. We do have a number, but we're allowing people to enter in information. So if we click the little pencil, you can see this isn't a terrible way to do it. You can do it this way. What I love about this is that we're very clear of the variable name. We're very specific about what we're asking. We have here in this field note, we're telling the person what it is in. We also have an age range, right? We're saying minimum is 18 and the maximum age that we're looking for is 45. So I don't hate this. And we've left this as a number. What we don't want to do is actually make this as this, where there's no information. This we absolutely hate, because this we could put in 2000 and be able to go away. And we don't want that. We can put, I don't want to answer this. And then that will be what's there on the back end. So even if you're going to just allow a type in, there are all of these constraints that you can put on it, right? So I'm going to change this back to mom age here. Make sure I'm saying that this is going to be a number. We're not including anybody under the age of 18. We don't want anybody over the age of 45. I want it to be in years. So I'm going to let people know that this needs to be in years. You can say whether or not this is an identifier, whether or not this is required. Again, the identifier is really helpful, because as statisticians, sometimes we're not allowed to have access to identifiable information. So as a coordinator, there are different ways that you can set up the export that an analyst can only export non-identifiable information. And so what SAT or what REDCap does is it um, changes like all the dates to the same like difference. Like it changes it, say like by 2 weeks, and it does it for all of them so that any differences that you're looking at are going to be the same. So if like you're trying to determine age, you don't want somebody to put in their age. You want to say when they enrolled in the study and then their date of birth to get their age when they enrolled in the study and maybe get their age at the end of the study or whatever. You can use it just by based on dates. So this can also be really important if you're worried about PHI. Or you could also do it this way that you just have, you can put in as a radio button. So this is doing a drop down. We're only allowing one single answer. We're still doing age. I would have put mom age mom. The other one was mom age, which is fine. I put the field note here just so people know, whoever's looking at it knows what unit I'm looking for. Because we're not looking for months, we're looking for years. And so in this case, I didn't use like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as the value that's going to be if you're exporting out just the values. I made it the same. So like 18 means 18. So then therefore, when you export out the data without the label, so the raw data, the 18 here actually means 18. So you don't have to go make this 1 and then have, on the back end, like 1 means 18, 2 means 19. So in cases like this, if you are just like wanting to be specific of numbers, you can just pull that out like this and it could be the same all the way through. Whoops. Does that make sense? Okay, so these are two other different types that you would want to do. This is the type where you can pick more than one race. And this is something a lot of the times with race, it's not it does make it harder on the back end, but a lot of people identify as more than one race. So this is a case where I wouldn't say make it a radio button. You might have to make smaller categories potentially, but you want to make sure that you're gathering all of the information so that you're getting the correct and most the race that the participant identifies with. And so how you would do that, you would do this checkbox multiple answers. And so you can see here, I've included in the note here, choose all that apply. So as they're looking here, they can see at the bottom, I'm saying choose all that apply. And then again, here for marital status, you usually don't have two different marital statuses, right? That's a very rare thing that would happen. You usually just have one. So again, you can see here, we just have the 1, 2, 3. This is the value that will be exported in the raw versus the label. But you can see here how I've had don't know and refuse to answer as 998 and 999. So this is what we had decided before. And so going forward, don't know or refuse are going to be labeled with 999 or 998. And I think I did that with here. No, I didn't. So that's what we hate, right? We would actually want this to be 998 as refused. Okay, so here are two different dates. And I hate this because you can see here, this is the type is month, day, year, and this is year, month, day. Now for a coordinator, it's fine. You can just click it and you move on with the rest of your life. Except on the back end, this is really difficult for us to deal with. And so here I would change this. I don't want this. I want this to be month, day, year. I would add in the month, day, year down here in the footnote. So therefore, when we're reading it, we can see this is the way that we want to put in. You can even be more specific in this footnote just to make sure it's very clear that you want month, month, day, day, and then year, year, year. Again, the more specific you can be for people, the better off you are, because that's how it's going to be put in the back end. But people can do today, or they can click the um, calendar. But I know a lot of people just end up typing it in because it can just be extra time to click these buttons if you're not doing it the day that, like the expected date, right? That's usually not going to be the date you're enrolled. Um, what I did want to show is that all of these variations here. So you can see here we have date time with hours and minutes, right? And so there are the different ways that you can have the day, month, and year. And then again, you can include seconds. So whatever way, so even if you have some that are just dates and then some that are date with second, date with time, make sure it's consistent. So don't pick this as your date and this as your date time, right? Because now it's off again, right? They don't match up. Again, you want to make sure it's consistent throughout. Does that make sense? Okay. And so this is again just other information that we're including um, that we've seen here. So we have no, yes, refuse, don't know. Again, we don't love that these are different. So we had this was 999 and this was 998, I think. And I personally prefer no to be 0 and yes to be 1, right? Um, and if you prefer 1 and 2, that's fantastic. But again, we want to make sure that it's consistent throughout. So here, see, we already had no and yes as 0 and 1. So we want to make sure that it's consistent. So here, I hate this because there's no limitations. I can put in whatever. I didn't put anything in here. And I didn't even tell anybody how to put in the height, what unit I should put in the height. So somebody can do like 5 and 2 inches, right? They could put that in. They could put five. Oh, wrong one. Right? They could put it in any form, which again makes it really hard to pull it out on the back end because you could do feet as feet, you could do feet as feet, you could do feet as feet, you could do it as just an quotation, right? There are multiple ways that you can indicate feet in here. And so if you don't give like a specific way that you want the data entered, you can get a mismatch of things on the back end, which again, an analyst can deal with it. That is not the issue. It just takes longer, right? So we want the way that you want to make databases is to make data management on the back end for an analyst a lot shorter. So a great way to do that is to, for example, mother's height. We want the height in feet. We have it here in the footnote and in inches. So when you also come in here, we have that this should be an integer. Okay, so we want it to just be a number. And we have a minimum and maximum, right? We don't expect anybody to be under 3 feet or over 9 feet as an adult. You can adjust that as needed. The same here with inches, right? You can have technically 0 inches or 11. We have it again as an integer. We have the inches down here. So the cool thing is that if I were to put 10 in here, I'm going to get a range saying, hey, this isn't correct, right? So it's also a really good thing on the front end for a coordinator or anybody else to be like, oh, shoot, I didn't mean to do that. I actually meant to put in, 6, right? Again, you try to put in 13 here and they're gonna be like, nope, 1 to 11. You can even up that to 12, but technically at 12, it is an additional foot. So, but again, we are all humans and we're not perfect, right? And so having these different fail safes that I love that REDCap does make sure that as a coordinator, or as a participant putting in the information, that you get feedback. So therefore, on the back end, again, one of the things that a lot of analysts look at is outliers. And sometimes those outliers are actually misinputted information, that human error, just the data was entered incorrectly. So a way that you can decrease that from happening is to have those limits on what is allowable within data entry. Okay. And so I have the PHQ in here, but I don't have the GAD, the general anxiety scale. So I need to add that in here. So one thing I love about REDCap is that they have these instruments, which are standardized surveys that exist, and even some surveys from other people, from other REDCap that they're allowing to be used. So you could do import. Say you wanted like demographics. Maybe did I spell that right? I did not. You can search in the library, and they have a bunch. So like if you're like, hey, I want to use this person's demographic information and then like sort of edit it from there, like what you need and don't need, this is something that you can do. This is actually really fun to play with because you'd be surprised how much information is in here. What I want is the general anxiety disorder scale. So you could do two here. I'm just going to click this one and I'm going to say import into my REDCap project. I'm going to say agree. So I'm going to add this into the project. And so we can see here, I'm going to put it up here because I want it to be moved because this is because it's going to be answered at the same time. And we can see here, I didn't designate this for any of my events. So I can click that and it'll take me here and you can see the generalized anxiety disorder form isn't going to be asked at any time point. So what I'm going to do is I want this asked at baseline 26 weeks, and I actually want it to be also at the end of the study. And then I'll make those changes and then save. So then I'll come back to designer, and then we can see now we have that all available. In here, I have laboratory results. Okay. So one of the laboratory information that we want, our vital signs, as it were, is blood pressure. And so I'm sure people have heard it's like, I don't know the correct, but there's one number over another number that you're always given. Again, we've talked about this. I don't like this because this doesn't give me any information on how to enter the information. And again, there's no constraints on what it is. And this var4 isn't helpful. I don't know what that is. But you can see here, I did systolic and diastolic because those are their two measurements. I say not only within this part, but here at the bottom of what it should be. If we go in here, I know it should be an integer. I didn't put a minimum of a maximum because I don't know what the general range should be, but I'm sure that there is one. And so this is going to be a little bit of not necessarily a group effort, but one of the things we wanted to add is glucose. So I'm going to add a field here. So can somebody tell me what kind of field do you think I should put? Should be a text box, should be a calculated field, multiple choice? So it should be a text box because we're going to be entering in information. So I'm going to say we want glucose. We'll just say like first glucose. And then what name should I give this? Should I give it var5, var6? If I was asking you to create this, what would you name this variable? You could also just write it in the chat if you don't want to say it out loud. Yes, love it. Fluke one. I love it because it also says I'm saying first. So I love that you put in that not just fluke, but an indication of which one. Because if anybody's taken a glucose test when you're pregnant, there's like the first one, then there's another one, and maybe sometimes the second one, unless you also do the second glucose test. And I think that there's like a million. Um, it felt like a million at least when I was getting it done. I always failed my first one. Okay, now validation. What do you think I should put here? Should I do date type? Should I do the date? Integer. Yeah, perfect. Now, again, I don't remember what the minimum and maximum should be. But what I do know is that this should be in milligrams per deciliter. So I'm going to put that here and here. The more places that you can have what should be the unit is what we want. You want to have that as clear as possible for everybody. So perfect. Awesome sauce. Okay. Um, Now we have the demographics of the infant. So we're going to add a field here and we want sex. So I'm going to make this should I make this a single answer or multiple answers? What do you think? Yep. So I'm going to do radio buttons. Um, and then I'm just going to do male and then to female. And because I'm using male and female because we're specifically asking for the sex of the baby. And if we're talking about gender, a lot of the time there's a lot more options. But here we're asking specifically for sex. Now, should this be, how do we think about var sex? Do we like that? I don't hate it, but like whose sex? Why do we need var in front of it? What do you think would be a better option to label this variable name? That's better, but do we have, is there a way to make it a little bit more specific? Yeah, sex baby. Love that. We could do sex infant as well. Um, there you go. Another cool thing that you can add, um, that you could do, I can't remember. Like, I don't want to write out. Ooh, okay. So I want to do the race of the, this is just because I have extra time. So I'm going to show you guys how to do something cool. So, or we want the race of the baby as well. So what you can do, and I don't want to write this all out again. What you could do is first you can copy, right? And what's really cool is that it does like an underscore too. Like if you have to like ask a question multiple times and or even just twice, you can do that. But then you can also move fields and then you can say where you want it. And so if we go here to infant, uh, so then I would just come in here and I would just change this to be infant and change this to be infant. So that's just a cool thing that you can do. So therefore, you know that these numbers, the values, and the labels are going to be the same for mother and infant. All right. That is it for me. How do I stop share? Does anybody have any questions? Did you learn anything new? Oh, okay, good. Awesome. There's so many cool things with REDCap. There's so many different things that you can learn. Um, and again, how to put it in. The more clear and concise you can be is what you wanna have. So if nobody has any questions, thank you for coming.
Thank you, Samantha.
Okay. I mean, don't worry. Okay, I've literally done some of these is because I've literally done them. And it was a pain for me on the front end and the back end. So
Yes, now I'm seeing what a pain this will be on the back end.
exactly. And like this is also like self-learned, but I was like, man, I wish that I did not do that. So
Yes. Well,
there's
thanks for all
always
the
more to
tips.
learn. So
Well, thanks all again for joining. The link for the attendance and raffle is in the chat.